Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
This is Capital Notes from Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Maayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross. He's editor of WizPolitics.com. Hello, J.R. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, so we're going to start off with Governor Tony Evers' executive order on the COVID vaccine. What was it, and how does it differ from federal guidance from Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s agency?
Well, in the most simplest terms, Evers wants to maintain the status quo, which is you can get the COVID-19 vaccine without a prescription and your insurance can cover it. There are critics of what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is doing at the federal level, saying that while he argues he's not restricting access to the vaccine, he's making it harder to get because if your insurance won't cover it or if you need a prescription, it's a barrier to getting it, right? So Evers wants to maintain what we've been used to for a long time. The second piece of it, though, is just how effective will these orders be? Because, yes, we have an order from the governor directing his agencies to make this thing more accessible, but there are some limits. So Department of Health Services, it issued its guidance that kind of maintains what we've known for a while. There's also the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance, which oversees insurance plans, right? It issued a bulletin this week basically telling, insurance, we want you to keep covering this without passing on the cost to the people who are part of your plans. The challenge, though, is there are limits to that directive. So, for example, OCI doesn't have authority over federal plans. So if you're getting your coverage from Medicare or Medicaid, they can't really do anything about that. They can't tell them what to do. And then, too, with private plans, employer-provided plans, there are also limits what they can do. In that bulletin base or the communication from OCI to others is like, hey, if you are trying to get the COVID-19 vaccine, if you can't get it without a prescription or if your insurance company wants you to pay for it, contact us. We'll try and help you. So it's not a guarantee for things to be as is, but they're trying to keep things as is essentially for people if you want that vaccine.
And what are the politics here? Are we going to see Republicans challenging Evers' efforts?
It's been pretty quiet on the Republican front. I mean, there is definitely a wing of the GOP that has got concerns about vaccines and mandates. No two ways about that. But the politics of vaccines we've seen nationally really kind of play more in Democrats' favor. If you look at national polling in reaction to the actions by RFK Jr., it hasn't been great for Republicans, right? There are Republicans who are kind of not happy with what he's doing and have some concerns. Is it a driver of election results? That remains to be seen. But just kind of a macro level of politics, this plays better for Democrats than it does for Republicans with the general public, right?
At the same time, vaccination rates overall are going down in Wisconsin. We're seeing even measles outbreaks. What's the challenge here?
Well, the challenge is that there are people who have more and more questions about the vaccines in general, and it's being exacerbated what's happening at the federal level, right? I mean, RFK Jr. is vowing to find a link between autism and vaccines, which has not been supported by any studies that I know of so far. We saw new numbers this week that the average vaccination rate for measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine has declined by roughly 5 points in Wisconsin for the past 8 years. And that's not going to probably change with what's happening because RFK Jr., it's a kind of like you set an example, right? People will argue that if you see the federal government or the Trump administration saying, hey, these things aren't safe or we have concerns, there are people who are more open to the RFK message or Trump message who say, okay, if they got concerns, that justifies my concerns. So it's probably not going to reverse that trend anytime soon with what's going on at the federal level.
All right, moving along to developments in the race for governor in Wisconsin. That election isn't until fall 2026, but the race is starting to take shape. Democratic Governor Tony Evers is not running again, so there will be open primaries for both Republicans and Democrats. You've said that all Democratic candidates are going to be anti-Trump and support abortion rights, but the question is how progressive or moderate the race will be on that end. What do we need to know at this point about that race for Democrats and who's running?
The field isn't set, and until it is, it'll be hard to figure out exactly what lanes people are going to have. So first part of that equation, Josh Kaul, the Attorney General, he's been considering a bid. We're waiting on him. He probably would be the front runner if he got in because he's been elected statewide twice and had more money in the bank at the end of June than others. It's going to be a slog to raise money in this race because so many candidates, a lot of donors like to hold back on what they're going to give until they know either, okay, this person's going to win or this person has won, they'll get involved, right? So there's that component to it. Then two, if Kaul doesn't get in, Mandela Barnes might get in, former lieutenant governor who ran for U.S. Senate in 2022. If Josh takes too long to make a decision, Mandela might get in anyway. Missy Hughes, who is who just left as head of the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, she's looking to get in the race. So there are all these people getting in. The question becomes, all right, those lanes. In politics, we talk about lanes as in like, who's your base of support? Francesca Hong of Madison, Kelly Royce of Madison, both members of the state legislature, both got in the race. They're both competing for the kind of Dane County lane. Dane County is a huge reservoir of votes in the Democratic primary. David Crowley, Milwaukee County Executive, he's right now in that Milwaukee lane, right? Another huge reservoir of votes. Well, if Mandela Barnes gets in, he's from Milwaukee, so do he and David compete for that Milwaukee lane? Sarah Rodriguez, Lieutenant Governor, she's from Waukesha County, which is actually the number 3 county in the state for the number of Democratic votes in a typical primary, a very distant third, but still a big number anyway. So is she the suburban lane? We're still figuring that out. There's also, 3 women in the race right now. Missy Hughes might make it 4. Like there's a gender lane sometimes in politics. There's all these kind of like bases of support. And then 2, is the field going to be pulled toward the left with a Francesca Hong and Kelda Royce in the race? Francesca Hong is a member of the Socialist Caucus in the State Assembly. She is running an unabashed progressive platform, right? Like, there's no two ways about it. So is she going to have a real base of support there, or is that going to be a challenge for those to see if they move farther left to shore up and not lose support in that part of the caucus? Oh, by the way, when you move left or right in a primary, it makes going in the middle harder in a general election, right? Well, if a lot of the primary contenders go toward the left, the Democrats, does that mean there's a lane for a moderate like a Josh Kaul or, David Crowley, who can speak to the Milwaukee business community with credentials, credibility? There's just so many variables right now. Let's just kind of like hang back, see who else gets in. Is Josh Kaul in or not? Is Mandela Barnes in? Does Missy Hughes launch her campaign? Let's see who gets in. And then 2, we're getting fundraising reports in January. That'll give us a look at like what was raised this fall. Now, they're not going to be definitive because it's only going to be a couple, 3 months, but it's going to show you that quick sprint. Who was able to organize and get a message out to donors that was attractive to get money in the door, because that's going to be a key. Money is the lifeblood of a campaign. If you don't have it, you can't communicate, and that's a problem for you. So those reports might start to separate that field a little bit and show who's really serious and who's not.
You're tuned into Capitol Notes. I'm WUWM's Maayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross, editor of WizPolitics.com. That's fascinating. And of course, there's, a good solid 10 months until the primary. So there's a lot that can happen, as you are often to note. But I just have to follow up the Republican field so far. We've got Washington County Executive Josh Schoeman and businessman Bill Berrien, who are both closely aligned with GOP President Donald Trump. There are some others who've hinted at a run. What can you tell us about that leg of the race?
So Tom Tiffany is the one that we expect to get in like any moment now. He hasn't said for sure he's in. He's been dropping hints for months about a run for governor. And talking to people in a Republican primary anymore, getting Trump's endorsement is huge. And Tiffany seems the most aligned with Trump. Berrien has done digital and TV ads trying to wrap his arms around the president. Josh Schoeman talks about his support of him. Like, that's key. But Tom Tiffany's got a relationship with Donald Trump. The challenge for him, though, is that Donald Trump has sent a message to him and others that his concern is the House in 2026. He does not want to lose control of the House because he knows if Republicans lose control and Democrats have it, that means his agenda goes nowhere. That means there are going to be investigations of his administration because Democrats will oversight through committees. Like, he does not want that headache. He's seen it before. So the question becomes, all right, Tiffany gets in. Does Trump wait and endorse him next summer? when he sees if anybody else emerges as a challenger or if Tiffany is in a dominant position. Does he do anything for Tom Tiffany? Does he endorse somebody else? All these huge questions. But Tiffany likely, if he gets in, which looks like more likely than not, he becomes the front runner. He's elected official. He's got a platform. He's kind of aligned with Trump. There are a lot of people, sort of circles, who are behind him. But he has not been a strong fundraiser in his career. Now, granted, it can be a challenge to raise money in a district like Tom's, where you're up north. It's not really a money base for contributions. Now, if he gets some big donors behind him, that changes the dynamic a little bit, but that's his big question. Will he get Trump's will he get Trump's endorsement, and will he be able to raise the money that says he's a serious candidate, a serious contender to win a general election?
And of course, he's the congressman for the 7th congressional district in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, and one of the challenge for him is Republicans have bled support in the suburbs ever since Trump came on the scene. Tiffany is not seen as somebody who can reverse that. He's seen as somebody who can maybe tap into the MAGA voter who doesn't turn out unless Trump's on the ballot, but it's likely not going to help that suburban issue that Republicans have had for going on a decade now.
Switching gears a little bit, of course, last week there was an event that had ripple effects nationally. It was the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Can you talk about developments politically from that in Wisconsin, both in the outpouring of support for Turning Point and also in what some call a crackdown on free speech?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to be crass in kind of how we look at this, but look, politics are a part of it. You can't deny politics are part of this. And looking at the outpouring of support, there is something happening, people have told me, when you see all these folks turn out for a vigil, for example, in Waukesha on a random weekday night for Charlie Kirk. There's something there. There's a movement there. The question is, can you sustain it? So Turning Point, the group that Kirk founded, it's been involved in Wisconsin trying to turn people out for a couple of years now. They've had a mixed record of success. You go back to 2024, and there's a perception that Elon Musk group really came in and straightened things out, the operation here in Wisconsin. Turning Point was involved in the Supreme Court race this spring. Didn't seem to make a huge difference because the Liberal won by 10 points. But they're involved, they're here. Talking to people involved in that movement, this is a moment for them, kind of like, for them, on par with like when Martin Luther King was shot, Robert F. Kennedy Sr., like this moment that just sears into your memory of like, where was I, what happened, what did I feel? And they feel like they're going to be committed to this movement in memory of Kirk. Now, the challenge is, how do you maintain that kind of passion, that commitment? Because the election is more than a year away. And do you keep people's attention? We have such short attention spans in this country anymore. Is it sustainable? I mean, I had somebody point out to me last week that, there was an assassination attempt on Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania in the summer of 24. It wasn't really talked about that much by the fall, right? Like things just kind of fade away. But for Republicans, you're talking about a midterm election in which you have a Republican in the White House. Typically, your party struggles in that scenario. If you can harness that outpouring of grief and it becomes a political movement, a bigger one, that might help you a great deal politically, especially with young voters who's going to gravitate toward Kirk's message.
Well, and, there's been this sort of blowback against people who are, making political speech, in relation to that event and other events. Mm-hmm. Congressman Derek Van Orden of District 3, Western Wisconsin, has recently introduced a resolution related to free speech that would restrict federal funding to entities like companies that employ people who participate in certain forms of political speech. Can you fill us in a little bit on that?
Probably some massive First Amendment issues for that bill from people I've talked to. Now, one, we don't know if it ever get passed, but if it were to become law, definitely some First Amendment issues. What's interesting is Van Orden has been on a tear on social media about people who have been critical of Kirk or made light of his assassination or made insensitive comments. He keeps saying if an employee of school district X or college Y says this, $0 federal dollars. We're going to go target their federal funding. Well, now he's actually been calling for a restriction of federal funds or cut of federal funds to two communities in his district over comments that were made. One, Ellsworth is a school district about an hour west of Eau Claire. A teacher there made some remark on social media. He didn't care for it and said something to the effect of, I represent Ellsworth. Everybody there is great except for this one person. If this isn't dealt with appropriately, I will be cutting all money, grants, et cetera, to Ellsworth. So I'm going to reduce federal money because I don't like what this person said. In Eau Claire, there's a $20 million project. It's to clean up PFAS in the water, I think it is. They got an earmark for $2 million to help pay for the cost. The way these grants work a lot of times is you don't get the money up front. You apply for reimbursement once the work is done. They haven't applied for it yet. Van Orden put out a tweet saying these comments from these council members, if they're not dealt with, I'm going to have a meeting and go look at how we can rescind federal funding for Eau Claire. There's an example of this kind of blowback from conservatives. Like, if you cross a line that I have, I'm going to target you with your livelihood or your funding as punishment for that. And then we get this debate about what's cancel culture, what is culpability culture, like what's going on. And just the mess on social media where we go back and forth and argue all day long. It seems like.
And I was wondering, is this kind of thing like rescinding federal funding for speech that we don't agree with or comments that we don't agree with, is that business as usual in the federal government, or how is this? Is this sending alarms in ways that you've never seen? Like, how would you weigh in on that?
It's a new thing that I haven't seen much of. People aren't getting too excited about it just yet because they're not sure it's going to go anywhere. So let's kind of see what actually happens if there's actual retribution. But yeah, there's some alarm bells going off of like, where does this end, and what's the fallout from all this?
Well, thanks again for this context, JR, and thanks for joining me on Capitol Notes.
Anytime.
That was J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com, speaking with me, WUWM's Maayan Silver. Listen for our segments every other Monday with an extended segment on Lake Effect, and check out the Capitol Notes podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Sources and methods, the crown jewels of the intelligence community. Shorthand for how do we know what's real? Who told us? If you have those answers, you're on the inside, and NPR wants to bring you there. From the Pentagon to the State Department to spy agencies, listen to understand what's really happening and what it means for you. Sources and Methods, the new national security podcast from NPR.